Hi, folks. Welcome. We're going to get started in just a moment. Just give folks a minute to join us.
Hi, Iris. Welcome, Allison. Hi, Laura.
Welcome, everyone. We're just giving it a minute for folks to roll in.
Welcome, Ellen and Annalise. Hey, hey, New Society Publishers.
Yeah,
Hey.
I think that's EJ who got a funny email from me. Laura Thorne, hello.
Oh.
Hey, Laura. Hi. Hi, Iris.
Great. So we're going to go ahead and get started, and folks will join us as they join us. Good evening, everyone. I'm Susanna Hermans, co-owner of Oblong Books in New York's Hudson Valley. And tonight we are so excited to present a conversation with Ilsa Govan and Tilman Smith about their book, What's Up with White Women? Unpacking Sexism and White Privilege in Pursuit of Racial Justice. I met Ilsa virtually when she did an anti-racism training for our book selling staff, and she was wonderful. This is work that we are all in the long process of, and this book is going to help us move toward a place where we can do better and talk to each other about how we're doing. And Tilman is also fabulous, an educator, facilitator, activist. You can read their full bios on our website. We are just so happy you're here with us tonight. And they are joined in conversation with their longtime friend and educator, MG Lentz. Thank you, MG. Yeah. I encourage folks to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen to ask questions throughout the event, and our guests will answer them as they can. I will also be dropping in the chat some links for you, both to purchase the book, of course, and a link to Ilsa's group, Cultures Connecting, as well. Are you all ready? Would you like me to share my screen with those slides?
That would be great. Thank you. And we'll start with that, a quick introduction of what these are. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tilman Smith, and my pronouns are she and her. And before we get started, because we're getting started, we wanted to share two amazing organizations where the proceeds from the book will benefit. The first is the National Award-winning American History Traveling Museum, The Unspoken Truths, with Delbert Richardson. And this is a museum that chronicles the rich history of Africans in Africa and through to present day, their brilliance and resilience, and it's filled with artifacts and true history. Our next group, if you'd be willing to change the slide, is a group called Zulu for Solidarity, which is an organization that was started by Japanese Americans, many of whom were incarcerated unfairly during World War II, to encourage and support the closure of the current incarceration camps at the US-Mexican border, and to build solidarity with other groups that are trying to do the same. So with that said, if we would come back together, I want to say how happy I am to be here with Ilsa and MG and Susanna. Thank you very much for hosting. And I'll give Ilsa and MG a minute to introduce themselves, but I wanted to dive in for us to just really talk about why we wrote this book, why I wanted to write this book, and why I wanted to have this conversation with these two particular people. About 10 years ago, I saw myself, quite honestly, as a social justice warrior. I was out there. If there was a fight, I was fighting the fight. And I was sincere and I cared deeply and I was everywhere. And after a period of time, what I realized is that I had gone through many, many losses. I had been defeated a lot. I had made huge mistakes. I had burned a lot of bridges, and all in the name of being the social justice warrior. And it threw me. I thought, I'm on the side of good. Why isn't this working for me? People should know how much I care and how skilled I am at this. So once I had enough losses, I thought, let me just be quiet for a moment and let me figure out perhaps what happened to me. And I looked today in a book to see what I might have been thinking at the time. And this quote from a book called Mountains Beyond Mountains by Tracy Kidder came forward about a Dr. Paul Farmer who was trying to create the cure for malaria. And it sums up what I feel our conversation will be about tonight and why I asked these two phenomenal people to be in this with me. And it says, I have fought the long defeat and brought other people on to fight the long defeat. And I'm not going to stop because we keep losing. You know, people from our background, like you, like me, we're used to being on a victory team. And actually, what we're really trying to do is to make a common cause with the losers. Those are two very different things. We want to be on a winning team, but at the risk of turning our backs on the losers, no, it's not worth it. So you fight the long defeat. I don't care if I lose. I'm going to try to do the right thing. In that spirit, I asked Ilsa and MG to come into conversation because I trust them. I know how brilliant they are, how resilient they are, how funny they are. I knew that they would be curious and patient while we tried to figure out what's up with white women. And with that, I would love to hear from Ilsa Govan about what was your motivation? What brought you to this?
Thanks, Tilman. Yes, I love you too. I love being here with you. And such a pleasure, Susanna. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come back and be with the Oblong Books community. Just love all that you are doing in your part of the world. Right now, I'm joining you from south of the US border. I'm in Mexico right now. And so if you notice a delay in what my mouth does and what you hear, it's the result of joining you from so far away. But I'm delighted that I can be here with you and be here where I am physically right now. And I'm on the land of the Azatlan people in this area. And we wrote this book on the land of the Duwamish and the Coast Salish people in the Seattle area. And we acknowledge them in our book as well as pay real rent for occupying their territory. I grew up in a feminist family. I grew up knowing that I was going to have to fight, knowing that I was not any less than any of the boys. I grew up very much believing in a gender binary, and that has, as a cisgender person, my pronouns are she and her, that worked for me for most of my life, didn't question that. So many unquestioned assumptions, right? But definitely an awareness of sexism, the reality of patriarchy, and that we as women can band together to fight that. What I didn't know was the subtext of that was we as white women. can band together to fight that. Because of my white identity it being normalized by our society, I didn't even see myself as a white person. I didn't think of myself as having a racialized identity. I shouldn't put racialized in quotes because that's a real word. A racialized identity. I saw myself as having the normal identity. That's where the air quotes go. And so I assumed that people of color would have the same experiences as I did. And in fact, many of my relationships early in life with other women were harmed because of the fact that I did not entertain for a moment that we were experiencing the world in vastly different ways because of our race. And then when I was in college, I had my eyes open. I was working in the College Women's Center, of course, and I had my eyes open to this idea that white privilege really does matter. And I went back and I rewrote my autobiography as a white person, not like a published book, but I just went through all those experiences in my life and asked myself, how might whiteness have played into this? Yes, I'm smart, but I'm no smarter than the kids that weren't tracked into gifted programs in early elementary school because of the color of my skin. So when I became aware of my whiteness, I thought that meant that I couldn't address sexism or talk about sexism, especially in social justice circles, as an activist, because I would be completely derailing the conversation to even bring up sexism. And let's be clear, we do see white women and people with other marginalized identities who are white derail or detract from conversations about institutional racism, power, and privilege, especially when we get uncomfortable and our whiteness is called to our attention, derail to a marginalized identity. However, I read that so-called rule as never, no, sexism doesn't matter. And so really dismissed it. And it wasn't until Tilman invited me and MG to start having these conversations. And by the way, Tilman's son was in my 5th grade class when I was a classroom teacher. And that's another way that we go back many years. And MG and I went to grad school together. So anyways, it wasn't until Tilman invited me that I started seeing that not only is sexism influencing my white privilege and my white privilege influencing my experiences with sexism, but my race and gender experience are inextricably linked. And it has been incredibly powerful and liberatory for me to better understand that and be in conversations with other white women who are trying to unpack this in pursuit of racial justice. And one of those people is MG Lentz. And dear friend, who are you? What brings you here?
Hey, y'all. It is so wonderful to have this conversation. And I could talk about what has brought me here, but just kind of reflecting on how often, when I'm just listening to the two of you and reflecting on all of us that are out there too, how often do we as white women engage in conversations where we are with one another and having these meaningful thoughts and reflections on how we've brought together racism, sexism, our own feelings of being vulnerable. And there's so many things that arise when this happens. I was brought into this work and into these conversations, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago. I was at Pacific Oaks College and Tilman was working there at that time, and also was taking classes with Ilsa at the time too. And we had amazing teachers at Pacific Oaks. It was the first time for me that I was able to even look at what it meant to be a white person, to even understand that I was white. And so I really related to what Ilsa and both Tilman were saying, that it took a long time for me to even understand that I was white, that everything was I was normal. I was a normal person. And I was reflecting on, as a young child, remember being thankful that I was white. And I had these memories of how important it was to be a white person. And then when talking with Tilman about bringing up sexism and being in women's studies courses, taking a lot of courses of that as a white feminist, I thought I understood sexism until I realized, and in reading this book, and reading the book because it's just brilliant, looking at how I was in immersion, like I was a feminist, but I was judging all of the other white women. And I'm noticing too, as I have worked in doing this work with anti-racism and working on my own process, how much I judge other white women in the work of this. And I feel that like, even though we're here, these panelists, it comes up all the time, at least for me, that judging part, that comparing part. There's so much that we can have about these conversations as being white women and sexism and how this enters into our work on race. I really would like to talk a little bit about the idea of, I was thinking about this, of white women's tears. And if you could talk about that development model of how the white woman's tears shows up in the development model a little bit, if we could talk about that. I think that's so rich. Is that cool?
Totally.
Gentlemen, would you like to open up with that, or?
I would love it, Ilsa, too. And I'll add to it.
I was going to say the same thing, but I will jump in. One of the things that I think about with white women's tears is this is a behavior that is at the heart of sexism and white superiority, where because of the reality of sexism, I know that I'm not going to have power in a lot of situations when it comes to white men. And I have seen throughout my life the power shift a little bit if I'm willing to, through my tears, show my goodness, show my innocence, show my pain, in many ways, in a way that white men can then take care of me, which allows them to hold on to their sense of power while allowing me to get what I wanted that I couldn't get any other way. Like a story I share in the book of walking home with my sweetie, and and I want to go a different way, and he's like, but we need to go this way, and I'm like, no, I want to go this way, and he's like, we need to go this way, and we both have very good reasons. And then I started crying, and all of a sudden he's like, oh, we can go your way, right? And just noticing that, and I am a crier, right? So I'm not saying that's why I always cry. I cry when I'm passionate about something. You might hear my voice crack tonight when I cry, when I'm feeling empathic towards somebody. And so it's not that we're saying that there's something wrong with tears, but we need to be aware as white women around how our tears can often hijack race conversations when we make it about us and our discomfort. And I think that tears are one way, and again, this is not always when white women cry, but it is one way that white women signal our virtuousness and our goodness and our innocence when we're being called out on our racist behaviors, that causes people to then want to cater to, pay attention to, take care of us. And in fact, we expect that they would, because that's a society that we grew up in. And if they don't, then we'll say, well, she was mean or she was aggressive, and it's usually a person of color that will then end up getting punished, especially when this happens in the workplace, for making us cry. And so I think that that's a really important dynamic. There's so much more that could be said about it. I'm just thinking about the workshop that I did today, and the difference between a white woman in the workshop said, I sometimes cry when I think about racism and the impact that it has on the life of my Black daughter and what she experiences every day. Is that wrong? And I said, well, I feel like the empathic pain that you feel in relationship to your daughter, how could that be wrong? Let's all of us be more sad about the impact that racism has on people of color if they're not our children, as if they were our children, because we are related, right? And that to me is very different than a white woman crying and saying, but how can you call me racist? I have a Black daughter. And so for us in that moment, to be able to discern the difference doesn't mean that that won't have the same impact when we do cry. So I bring my tissues. I have a lot to say about that, apparently.
Thanks, Ilsa, and thanks for asking the question, MG. I want to start by saying that sexism is real. And it's important for us to understand as white women, important for me to understand how sexism helped me develop. It impacted my development as a human being. And one of the strategies that I very intentionally, or maybe not so intentionally, developed to survive sexism with the white men in my life was to cry. A little bit different than the great example Ilsa offered of like, I want to do it my way. I was at times in danger, in physical danger. And the one thing that would get that to stop would be tears, because it would kind of help the other person understand, oh, you're a real live person. Okay, maybe I've gone too far. Not always, but sometimes. So tears can be a strategy to survive violence, emotional violence, all sorts of things. And I certainly developed a fight or flight muscle in my amygdala that tells me like danger, like which way should I go, fight or flight. Very important, really important for me to develop that. When I'm with people of color and I get feedback around being racist, somehow my fight or flight goes into the same thing, like danger, danger, danger. And so I actually misinterpret discomfort. What I think is danger is actually discomfort. And before stopping to really think about it and kind of let it occur to me that this is just feedback, that I've done something racist, I'm not in danger. My body sometimes cries, sometimes I say no, sometimes I get defensive. So all sorts of mechanisms come up. This isn't to give myself a break or to say like, see, I don't mean to do it. But it is a phenomenon that I found that I need to be conscious. So when I cry, why am I crying? And am I really in danger when I'm around people of color, or am I just feeling discomfort?
Wow, so I'm on the other end. So this is what's interesting, because I'm thinking about that. And so I see tears as weakness, like, so kind of tying in what you're both saying, so that when I'm in conversations, particularly about race, I won't cry. I will be strong. I will be the strong one. And I will look to the other white folks, particularly white women that are crying, and I go, weak, needy. And I'm not saying I like this, y'all. This is not a part of me that I like at all. But that's where I'll go. And so I don't cry. But I still get activated. And as you were talking to him, and I was realized for me, anger and tears go together, because it's the same thing. So I'll be angry and I'll get into what in the book is like defense, like, how dare you call me out? Don't you know the work that I've done? Don't you know who I am? Don't you know that I have a nice, I'm nice to people. I have a deep spiritual foundation. This, I won't usually say it, but I feel it. And I know it comes out in my body. And we have some of these gestures in the book too, but they do. But I feel it, and I know that I create barriers, particularly with women of color. I mean, it just happened today, where I get defensive, and she said, "You're tight," and I'm like, "Really? I am." So it's interesting how it comes out in my body, and that for me, tears is, again, I use it as being weak, needy. and
Mhm.
that I haven't accepted that it is part of the process, because I can have tears. I can engage in, and I do, it's not like I don't, but particularly around having conversations about race, I will make sure that I'm not crying to do it right, to do it correct. But it's interesting how it still manifests in the body and how it'll come out sideways in other ways. Yeah.
Mhm.
Good cat. Good
Mhm.
cat.
MG, you mentioned the gestures. And one of the things that I was thinking about when you were talking earlier is just how we intentionally wanted to structure our book talks. What is it with me and air quotes tonight? Our book talks as events that were a little bit different from traditional book talks. And you talked about the competition, and even this idea of like the sage on the stage, you know, who wrote the book. So Tilman and I obviously don't have any work to do. MG doesn't have any work to do, but all of you need to read this book, right? And then throughout the book, so we're trying to like live into the way that we want to see the world be. We're trying to live into the stages of balance and integration that we talk about in the book, and really think about in everyday practices, what might that look different from our book talk to our conversation. And one of the things that we included because of your influence was the gestures at the end of each chapter that describe the different stages of identity development. We named 6 stages that white women go through and patterns of behavior in each. And I was just wondering if you would talk a little bit more about that, because that's such a powerful contribution to this.
Okay, so of course, see, because I know all this, so I'm referring to the book as we're talking. So as we go through the different, if you look at the book, there's different developmental models, and there's different ways of that we are being in the world. And in the developmental models, you know, as I was looking at the gestures, and they can change. So when you're reading these gestures in the book, some of them might work for you and some of them don't. But as you're reading through, you'll find that with each model, something will come up for you in your body. So I kind of encourage you to do that embodied. I think that term, to embody what that is for you. So these suggestions are just suggestions. These gestures are just suggestions for what work for you. For example, in defense, I think that that's one that it's like putting your fists up, and you're in defense, and how not only are your fists up, but really feel the tightness in your body. When you're in defense and someone has called you in for something that you may have said or done, a way that you were in a conversation, the way that we come in as white women and we oppress and we hurt people of color. When we feel called in and we are the right white person, we are in that defensive mode. Where do we feel that in our body? Because as I was just talking before, we bring it in. So when we're aware of how our body's feeling, then we can go, oh, defense, watch what you're doing. Breathe, I'm really uncomfortable. And I found just even saying I'm really uncomfortable can really help with the conversation along with the gesture. So invite you, if you want to, you can kind of feel what that's like for you when you're in defense in your body. If you would like to do that, you can just kind of feel the tension in your body, what's going on for you when you feel that. There are other gestures as well. Did you want, when we want to talk about the different developmental models, I'm not going to talk about them as much, but immersion is just basically where, you're in it. We are in white supremacy. We are in this whole world of whiteness and being white and right. So I'm not going to get too much into this, but when you look at the continuum, we are on one side of the continuum and we've got it all. We are just kind of feel that superiority in your body, because I have it, we all have it. So embodying what that superiority might feel like. Now we all have a different way. In the book, we have a different way of presenting it, but just kind of feel how you embody superiority. And it can be theatrical, like we're doing right now, or it can be real, because there's ways that I bring in my superiority all the time. the way I come into a room, the way I want attention, the way I hold my attention. So just being aware of how we bring our bodies into situations is a way that you can work with these gestures in the book as well. It calls us to be embodied, like Resmaa Menakem's work too, like being able to find out where this work is in our bodies would help us work through this. Thank you.
MG, as you say that, I was thinking of a story of a time where I got feedback that when I get controlling or impatient or kind of like, come on, let's move it out, that my whole face changes and I actually become scary looking and ugly, were the words used. And this was said to me by somebody, a woman of color who I love, who loves me, who I had actually shown her this side to me in a public meeting. And I watched her literally recoil from me, still not owning that I was like, I mean, I was in it in full immersion, right? Like, let's get this done. And with no understanding of the oppressive energy that I was pushing forward, because I was ready to be finished, right? When I got that feedback from her, I was stunned. It never occurred to me what I looked like when I was being defensive, controlling in my perfectionist mode. I just thought, it's me, you know me. I'm just a little miffed, right? So to get that feedback was such a gift. Now, did I take it as a gift right away? No, I went back to my desk and I had a loud inner brain conversation with myself about how dare she doesn't understand the pressure I'm under. I'm such a good person. I'm a social justice warrior. All of that chatter was going on. And it took exactly what you said, just time, reflection, breath. What does my body look like? What a risk she took to give me this feedback. What that is love, to take that risk, right? But I've tried to never not dismiss how I physically look when I show up in my superiority in that way.
Thank you.
And I love what you said, MG and Tilman, thank you for that example, because I think that's something that a lot of us can relate to. I know that, and I say us, I include myself in white women. And if you don't identify as a white woman, then just know that's when I say us, and why I do. And that I really feel that, like I can think about those times where I'm like, but we have to get things done. We have an agenda. We have to get to this. And so I feel like that story really resonates. Mm-hmm. And then this idea that you said, MG, of like, and when if we embody this, even for a moment when it feels uncomfortable to embody it separate from those moments, that the embodiment can help us to remember when we're in it. And I never thought of it that way before. So I really appreciate that, because I think it's a really helpful reminder. I don't think that we live into social justice values. Everybody's got their mission and vision statements and they're real nice. But a lot of people are wondering, what does it look like to walk the talk? And we can talk about policies and practices, but we are not going to policy white supremacy out of the ways that we're embodying it in everyday interactions. And so we really need to be conscious of that and hold both of those at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I also
what
find
else do you want to talk about? Go ahead.
Well, I was just kind of cracking up a little bit about, didn't know that you really liked agendas, Ilsa, or, like you like the order. That's all new to me.
Yeah. I know. It surprises a lot of people when I tell them I have control issues. They're like, oh.
Well, it's interesting because as we're talking, I'm not sure I'm going to tie it in, but thinking about like when we're talking, particularly talking about issues of race and sexism, it's like, so a control issue will come up and then the missing puzzle piece for me will come up, which I hope you can stay with me, which would be not worthy. So if I see someone with control, I'll feel like my puzzle piece of I'm not worthy. For instance, if I'm feeling that someone has control over the situation and is has a lot more information about anti-racism, has a lot more of the language, and has control, my unworthiness will kind of come in there. So it's really interesting, this dance that'll happen around these issues of race and having these strong conversations, or if there's just feeling this imbalance that will come up. So the anxiety or the stress manifests in different ways. Another way is the incessant talking, and then the other one that'll come up is the silence. So how these puzzle pieces fit in, which I really appreciate the way that all of these models that we have or ways of being, where there's balance that comes in, like the balance with the tears, the balance with our body, the balance with who we are, where there's a blend of humility and control, where there's like this blend of being able to have confidence and arrogance, where like there's this blend that we can bring in that takes practice. But I think for me, the key is true humility, that I don't really need anything external about this work to make me feel like I need to keep talking or I need to be front and center, but to be present and look at that piece of me that wants to step back when I should be stepping forward. Does any of that resonate at all?
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. I was thinking about that, that time, that the story I've shared with you all, and I wrote about in the book too, where I was showing the whole room what I knew about white privilege and wanted everybody to see, and I was talking a lot. And then a South Asian woman said, well, what do you want, a gold star? And luckily Tilman gave me a sheet of gold stars, so I don't have to do that anymore in front of groups, because I wanted the gold star. And for me, that's an example of that stage of projection where I'm looking to others to reflect back to me, because I'm not certain enough in who I am, and looking for that like external, what do you call it, like accolades for my racial justice work, whether it's from other white people or people of color, and really comes from questioning myself.
Yeah.
I also wonder, tell me if you agree, it is questioning myself, but that's also my internalized sexism to some degree. So part of it is I'm competing with you because that's how I'm going to get ahead. I'm going to get noticed. So if I perceive that you're smarter than me, then I'm going to be like, I'm either going to be all in, I'm going to take you down, or perhaps I'm going to just back off and say, whatever. For a long time before I really started thinking about how much we as white women are in a competitive mode, before the three of us started just really having deep conversations about constructing knowledge together, before we invited people to come in and help us with every part of this book, I know. I thought I could figure it out, but I'm going to expand it to other people. And it was only through the experience of true collaboration and collective thought and heart and action that I realized I could never do this alone. Like, what a silly notion. And I would never want to do it alone. But it's a practice that I had to experience to understand that. But how about you two?
I still have to keep reminding myself of that. Like, I know that that's true what you're saying, Tilman, and I still think I got this. I could do this alone. I could do this better than, and it's just, and I'm just being honest with y'all, and I feel a little ashamed of that as I'm saying it. And the only thing that keeps me from shame is just knowing, like, this is a lifetime of learning, of internalizing superiority, of internalizing sexism, of fighting against sexism, that really, and living in this individualistic kind of culture that really has me thinking, I'm the best, I got this, I'm number one, and wanting that affirmation from other people to the extent that I might exclude some voices in order to get the recognition, some necessary voices in order to get the recognition. And I would love to say that I've moved past that, and it's just not true for me. And I am working on that. I'm working and I'm working, and I'm going to keep working on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, not me. Of course, I've got that figured out. That's a
I'm
joke.
glad you did. I'm glad one of us.
Yeah. So what I'm feeling right now
I saw
too is that, yeah, it's like, just I had to take a breath when you were talking, both of you. And, because I can feel like we get talking and then we have put out so many different things that we've shared and how I'm taking it in the body. And then just the moments to just have a silence and reflection, just like, whew, that was a lot that was just taken in. Or the way we have to, all of us right now as white women together here, taking this in and talking about it, just taking a moment and like thinking for myself, just, it's okay. Just to model, like, whew, got to take a breath. Got to just reflect, got to just maybe not act for minutes, because sometimes I can't. I'll be flooded, kind of like the rain that's been here for so long. and just take a moment so that the flood can kind of ease down a little bit, and then think about it, and then engage back into the conversation, because that feeling of always having to be right is exhausting, and always having to have the right answers. Like, why? Like, why do we do not, is obviously because white supremacy is not working. So it is not the right answers, right way to do things. Yeah. So do we want to check and see if we have any questions?
Yeah, I would be happy to read this one, as I think it relates to what you were just saying, MG, if that's
Okay.
all right with you too.
Yeah.
All right. This is from an anonymous attendee, and they said the sequence of amygdala stimulation includes freeze collapse in addition to fight or flight. Those who have survived major complex trauma may automatically have the freeze response because fight flight did not have effect in the past. Perhaps someone like myself who has this response might need to create a pause that might make space to catch up with what they're actually feeling to keep showing up. Any thoughts about this in addition to what you've already said?
I love how that happened, and thank you so much for the question. The freeze, I have gone through periods where I've frozen as well. Both Ilsa and MG know that there are times I lose my voice. Literally, I can't talk because everything's so tense, and so I'm just gonna. And what I need to do is just pay attention to my body and just understand what's activating it. That is not something that was rewarded in the day-to-day work that I did that was fast-paced and quick and cerebral and let's go. So I could be activated. And I did not allow myself to create strategies to take care of what was happening with my body, because I didn't feel, a little bit like UMG. I love that you said this. I felt a little bit weak, a little bit like, figure it out. You're, put on your big girl pants, be at the meeting, be tough. And I was buying into that instead of like, wow, this is serious. This is impacting you. Just take a moment. But that was very difficult for me to do, and it still is at times.
Thank you for that question. I thought that was kind of interesting how I was just kind of reflecting on this, and then the question was read. I thought that was really, really, really good, really interesting how that happened. I was going to say something about that. I don't have any answers, but a couple of acronyms. One is one that we came up with, I think it was me actually. It's called STAB, stop and take a breath. And the other one, I apologize because I can't remember exactly who started this acronym. I learned it from Sharon Salzberg, but I think Sharon Salzberg got it from someone else, and it's RAIN. Ruth King talks about this too. It's called RAIN, and it's recognizing the feelings and kind of accepting them, investigating them, and then nurturing. And I find that acronym really helps with these conversations, and just kind of really helps when we're in these situations, whether, with conversations with sexism, conversations with racism, just conversations with other folk, just being able to model what it is as a white person to use these acronyms and to reflect deeply on where these feelings are come from. So I appreciate acronyms. So hope that helps a little bit. I think RAIN is a great acronym as well.
Yeah, and I love STAB because it always makes me laugh. It reminds me of the two of you, and it's in those moments where I am feeling the tension in my gut. I'm feeling like I have to go. I'm feeling like get out of my way, right? And that there is even possibly some violence in that, the acts of supremacy that show up when I'm in that place that Tilman, you were describing in the workplace, the go, the get out of my way is violence towards people of color, right? And so, and towards other white people as well often. And so shifting that mindset to STAB, meaning stop, take a breath, it's easy for me to remember in those moments. Okay.
Take a breath. Yeah. And I was thinking there's so many different ways that we show up, like, so Tilman and Ilsa, I love you, and you're out there and doing workshops and writing books and doing all of these things. And then there's different ways that I've learned that I show up. I show up in ways of being one-on-one with children, of being one-on-one with my friends, of being one-on-one with the person that I don't know on light rail and starting up a conversation, being one-on-one in the street with talking with someone. So we all engage in different ways. And I notice when this comes up for me, when I start that comparing, I'm not perfect enough, I'm not this enough. Hey, let's do it with what feels comfortable for you in your way. And we all present this differently. And there's really not one way to show up, but I've learned for myself, just show up in the way that's most comfortable for you, where you're the most can be in your body and embodied in that. I just kind of want to put that out there because that comes up for me a lot, not as much as it used to with the two of you. So I just realized I show up in my own way. And I don't know if any of you out there kind of relate to any of this, but I'm sure you all show up in your own ways.
I
We
love that.
Questions too. Tilman's answering.
Yeah. Yeah, please ask more questions. I'm going to shift us just a little, just because I've been thinking about this piece, that when Ilsa and I asked certain people to read the book before it was finally published, just to kind of look for content and tone and whatever, we got feedback from somebody that we care deeply about, a brilliant woman, Rachel Chapman. And as she read through the book, this was towards the end of our process as well. she was able as a Black woman to identify all the many, many places where we were continued to profess our innocence. And wow, that was a big ouch and a big eye opener. And we thought, wow, what, first off, again, what a gift. What long time she spent going through the book to see all of these examples. And what an amazing exercise it was, life-changing moment for us to go through the book and really grapple with that. And it made me realize how, I'm going to use the word desperate, but how deeply I want to see myself as good. I bought a little bit into the idea that I'm pure and that I'm innocent and I would never hurt anybody. I'm sorry. And I just wonder how that comes up for the two of you, because I regularly think of myself as a good person. I really think I'm a good person, but I'm not always a good person. So I'm trying to just kind of open up a conversation about being anti-racist, being a good person, being an innocent person, and what comes up for you when I say that. Just a little something.
Not something meaty to chew on, as the vegan and Paul. I really noticed, Tilman, that when you said all those things, I'm a good person, I'm this, and this, and then you said, I'm sorry. And I thought, oh, that's one of the ways that we don't actually apologize. We say, oh, I'm sorry, right? And then I thought, in race conversations, and then I thought, and sexism, I apologize for being in the room, and how often white women will automatically go to, I'm sorry, but, or I'm sorry this, or I'm sorry that. And there's very little sincerity around it. And it's a learned behavior to make ourselves less than, to apologize even for showing up in the room. So I just noticed that as you were talking. What does that have to do with goodness? I don't know. I was just paying attention to that when you were speaking. So MG, share what your thoughts are on goodness, and then I probably will have something.
Yeah, I just took a breath because I was thinking about that we are good people. Like, it's interesting how there's a difference between goodness and integrity and feeling this part of ourselves that is really, really whole and balanced and integrated. And I think that's goodness. So it's interesting how I would like to know that. I would like to be that. And I think for me, goodness isn't good. It's being right. I think I've conflated the two. And so good doesn't work for me, that word. It's more like I'm right because I'm basing it on an external feedback. And so I feel more like, am I in integrity? Am I feeling authentic? And then I hope that at moments, yeah, sometimes not, but we're working on it. And that's what I'm hoping to keep doing, particularly in these conversations, because that's where the stuff comes up, where I feel the judging, the unworthiness, the competitiveness, the control, all of it. And just get in the conversation and know you're going to screw up. No matter what I say or do, I'm going to screw up. And getting better about that, and rather than judging, which I do, I'm not saying I don't, but now it doesn't last as long. So I think I answered that question, but I was thinking about the word good. So it doesn't work for me as well. I get what you mean, but for me, it's more being right and looking right. Because you kind of know that I'm kind of don't like to be good. So more of so that's kind of my question, my answer. Is that?
Yeah. Throughout my life, I have consciously and unconsciously accessed privileges that I get through my relationships with white men by being good, by being a good girl, by behaving in this way that's expected, and very much invested in being nice, being good, and being liked. And so for me, there's a lot of that unlearning that even in that session I was talking about where I wanted the gold star, I really wanted people to like me. I wanted them to see my goodness. And I was so focused on me and everything about what do you think about me that I wasn't really leaning into the conversations about racism and what can we do together to work against racism. Now, let's be clear, I am the center of my universe. And when I center my goodness in a race conversation, then I'm usually not in a collaborative conversation about working against racism. And that's a pattern that I see in myself. And it's a pattern that I see in other white women. And I think that it's something that's very hard to name in other white women when I see it, because not only are we individually invested in our goodness, but the society around us is invested in maintaining our innocence and goodness. So if I'm going back to the beginning, here I go full circle, I'm bringing it back, y'all. All right, a white woman cries and she's showing that she's a good person. I share this story in the book. And then everybody on her staff that knows her rallies around her, gives her a plant, tells her, yes, we see you as a good person, and fails to attend to the racism happening in their school, or even the racism that was happening in the meeting where she was crying. And that's just one of the ways that tears and goodness coupled together derail the conversation.
Thank you, y'all.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Ilse.
I can't believe how fast that went. Thank you all so much for this extraordinary conversation. I think this is a great starting point for a lot of us. And hopefully folks will pick up the book, What's Up with White Women, share it with the women in your lives. Yes.
Wait,
And start these conversations. Thank you to
Thank
everyone who
you.
joined us tonight, and for all of our guests for giving your time and energy and emotional energy to us this evening.
thank
Thank
you,
you so much,
Susanna.
Susanna.
Thanks to everybody. Ilsa and MG. Mwah.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.